1 euro house in Italy. So this video is going to be about my experience in actually acquiring a 1 euro house in Italy, in Sicily to be more precise. And I would like to approach it from the point of view of the investment. And my intention is to share my experience with this. So years ago, I was looking for a place to live, and I thought about low cost options, and I did not exactly immediately hit on the idea of a 1 euro house in Sicily, but that was something on my mind, and I did some research, and I also explored various options as part of that experience, and I think that this series of videos is going to be actually covering that. Whether that will be something that I could actually recommend somebody else or not, and this is potentially an opening video on that. So my thinking is that it will be interesting to other people who are considering Sicily, and one should also keep in mind that I was doing that before the second season of the White Lotus series has hit the small screens internationally, and so that was one of those events in the culture, in popular culture, that has probably put Sicily on the map for a lot of people. But I was doing my search for either an apartment or house in Sicily in general before that, and I did not exactly zero in only on 1 euro houses, but also I thought maybe I should think of let's say a small apartment, maybe in major cities, maybe in Palermo, maybe in Catania, and I also thought about small cities such as Noto, Shaka, etc., so that I did go through a lot of options as part of that process, and then I think that this is a good experience to share, and also it fits with my large interest in Italy as a country in general, and I went through a process as part of that property search, and it is both a journey and an experience, and it did affect me in many ways. So that I think that people like me in the same kind of situation will be go through something in relation to Italy, Sicily, maybe as well, and the culture and the country and the economy, etc., etc. Since you learn more about the country when you also intend to move in as actually times go by, and that. So in this opening, I would rather start. Let's say first steps. Basically, my first steps were to find a small agency that will actually handle the property search, and that will be also responsible for the legal issues with that. Basically, it will be costing more or less around 4,500 euros for the whole thing. In other words, one way or another, it will be like very cheap up front, regardless of the cost of the property, so that anybody who plans to search for property in Italy, similar to Sicily, should be actually planning for costs. For, let's say, upfront, very initial, very basic costs of about 5,000 euros, maybe less, but that is very likely, so that only the legal dealings, not including probably search for property, let's say, services of the type, will be costing that, and that is a conservative estimate. In other words, this is what every blogger, every site says anyway, so that this is unavoidable by and large. And I don't think that if you go for 1 euro property, that will make a probably big difference. So that those sites of those initiatives up and running on the internet, be it, let's say, in Musumelli, be it somewhere else in Sicily, they will be saying exactly the same thing. So that even though there are websites that say, okay, they're going to help somehow or bridge some of the process or some of the costs. So that could be something to consider, so that whether you do research or not, or on your own, and I think that everybody who does that part of the process will be doing their own research, whether or not they get assistance, so that you'll be accumulating your own experience in that aspect. But in my case, I simply had a call via Skype or whatnot, or Zoom, with a small company based in Rome and in Palermo, and we had a start of the process for the property search, so that they simply farmed out the process to the trusted appraiser. It was somebody who knows the local market in Sicily, and somebody who could be with me on the property search part of the process, so that we had a separate call, an initial call, several calls over the whole thing with another person who was actually only with the property market, somebody who is an expert. And once again, there are websites like, let's say, Idealista, like Immobiliari, which are the main websites, so that those two will be listing those properties which are on the market. If you are looking for something which is already on the market as a property, in other words, since it will never be just the let's say the purchase of the property, since, let's say, if you do go for €1 property, it will still mean that you will have to be paying some extra for the municipality, because you're supposed to be doing a renovation. Then you should plan for the renovation, which should be done within the 3 years of the purchase. And that probably it will also mean that even after you do a renovation, it will still mean that you will have to install separately, let's say, electricity, even though that could be done already as part of the renovation. But I mean, the basic appliances, furniture, let's say, really basic stuff, even before you can move into that place, even though it can greatly depend on the quality, on the overall condition of the flat or house, whatever that may be. But let's say, in my experience, as I looked through, I would say a lot of announcements for sale. Even if those would be including, let's say, some furniture, it would usually be like very old-fashioned, very dark, or very heavy, or very whatever. It was really outdated in style, and maybe, let's say, or it would be just some really run-down situation, so that you will be simply be advised to rip out everything you can find in the kitchen, since it will look really awful. Same thing will go usually for the living room. Same thing will go for any other rooms, so that it will be like, say, a wholesale renovation bill. In addition, let's say, to very minimal upfront costs, and then you should be thinking about a furniture where you will get in that, whether it will be IKEA, whether it will be maybe flea market, even though, let's say, I'm not sure about that. In my case, in another setting, I did use flea market furniture, which was very cheap, and it did serve its purpose for, let's say, some years. Even though it can depend on where you are and how far a flea market is, how much it will cost to bring the furniture into the house, etc., etc. In other words, it is like a very costly. Well, it can be relatively costly. This is why looking at the different options in terms of maybe, let's say, purchasing, let's say, a flat somewhere which is in a relatively good condition could be a good option as well, which has added to the uncertainty in my case, since I was thinking, okay, maybe this option is better in terms of the overall cost. or maybe in terms of if I would want to be renting out a property, let's say on the Airbnb, etc., etc. So that one should also be thinking, okay, whatever, if I will be getting you, let's say, ideas about renting out, making money off the property, and I think that in other videos I will be covering a lot of those issues as well. And then maybe as a kind of let's say an advance announcement, I did not exactly buy the property. I simply froze the process since I wasn't sure how that will be fitting with my overall plans. And I think that could be also an option. In other words, whatever the length of the way you will be going with this process, which is very enriching in its own way in terms of its impact, in terms of how much you learn about that other market. I think that sometimes the best option is not to buy, but to stop and they say, okay, maybe this is going to be the best way to cut cost, or maybe exit out of the situation when you're not completely sure that it will be a good economic economic option or choice in your case. And I think we can be going through more details about the country, about Sicily, about the whole dealing with those who are on the ground, and what were my insights, what are my own outtakes out of that. So that we can wrap up this video on the note that essentially it can be a good option for somebody from North America, somebody from, let's say, even Europe. And if you do any minimal news search, internet search, you will be seeing articles of those who would be opting for maybe smaller towns or small cities in Italy, even villages. And it could be a good option as opposed to paying, let's say, really elevated prices for rent, buying and renovating the property somewhere, let's say in Sicily, Sardinia, somewhere else in the, let's say in Italy, elsewhere. That could be a good deal, especially if you think about, especially if you are a foreigner, and if there are options for being a digital nomad on a visa in Italy for, say, some years. And I think that could be something of a strategy where you could actually spend some of your money on this, live some years in Italy, then go away, or maybe you go to another place where you will be getting some sort of short-term or maybe a long-term visa as a digital nomad, and then actually coming back, etc. But there are also all kinds of issues to go through, let's say, where you will be considered a tax resident, how will you be managing reporting after you buy property in Italy, etc., etc. And I think it was these smaller items on the list, smaller aspects of the whole overall situation, which gave me a lot of pause. And I think that will be the case in many other, for many other people who are considering a €1 property in Italy. And I'm not part of those who would say, okay, this is a scam. Even though it could be more costly in the end than you would think. It will depend on the condition of the property, especially if it is a €1 house, so that you could be in for more in terms of renovation expenses than you thought. And then, of course, it is Italy. There is probably a presence of mafia. It is a different society. It is more of a Catholic society as well. You should also think about, let's say, how rich on average locals are, whether there are any issues with crime, whether there are issues with other, let's say, negative aspects of the society. Although many people do say on camera that they love the experience, that they really appreciate the local culture, etc., etc. But once again, it depends where you are coming from on the one hand, and maybe if you come from, let's say, from Spain, or you come from, let's say, from, let's say, any other country around the world where you are used to lower levels of crime or poverty or destitution, then living in a place like Sicily could be something of a challenge, especially if it is, like, say, a more poor area in Palermo or Catania, since cities like Catania are known to be less well off, with higher presence of mafia gangs, etc., etc. So that some of those issues can be affecting the eventual buy or sell decisions. So that I would say that it is still a journey. It is still can be a lot of fun, and Italy is a great country, I think, for its food, etc., etc. There is no shortage of series about Italy, food series, whatnot, documentaries, films, etc., etc. So that it has a lot of culture. As a country, you will be enriched on that level, and I think that it could even be a good investment proposition. But whether that will be, well, in your case, whether the property that you will be buying will actually make you a profit in the long term or even in the short term is still a good question, and it is no very much open-ended question. So that I would still say that this is something that watching videos about is going to be a very good idea, but whether it will be something you will be actually happy with as a decision that is something that only your own case will be responsible for in terms of the outcome. So that I would say that this series of videos I will be doing, it will be about this, and it will hopefully help you to figure out, okay, what's next, whether it will be a good idea or not.